Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the May DHCNI Digital Dispatches. You are all very welcome, and who can believe that we are in May already? This year, since Omicron has been going incredibly quickly. I'm Dan West. I am the Chief Digital Information Officer at the Department of Health in Northern Ireland, and I'm going to kick us off just very quickly, and then hand on to my esteemed colleague Craig Young, who I can see is on the call. Good afternoon, Craig.
Hey Dan, how you keeping?
Yeah, I'm all good. So just a really quick reminder, the reason that we do these digital dispatches sessions and have been doing them over a good wee while now is that it's really hard to communicate with people the way that we did pre-pandemic, pardon me, put the teeth back in. So filling large rooms full of people was a bit of an infection risk. So we decided we'd try a slightly different virtual ploy to reach out and engage with staff members all across the HSC, not just the technology community, and talk through topics that we think are interesting about what's going on in the digital space. The topic for today is really interesting, in particular for the technology gang, although not exclusively, and it's about the program that we're running that Craig is leading to build a new IT delivery and operations organisation here in the health and care sector in Northern Ireland. So without further ado, I am going to hand on to Craig. Do feel free, everybody, if you've got questions, stick them in the chat as we're going, or wait till the end, and I'm sure Craig will invite questions, and we will look through the chat function there and just curate anything. If it makes sense to, we'll, if Craig, you're all right with this, we'll jump in and interrupt Craig's flow. If not, we'll curate them and fire them at Craig at the end. So do feel free to make this an interactive session if you've got inputs, thoughts, or questions yourselves. Thank you, and over to you, Craig.
Perfect, thanks, Dan. Yeah, no, absolutely. We've also been questions at the end or through as you see fit. Can I just double check everyone can see my screen? Okay, I can see some nods. There we are, it's general nods. That's great. Perfect. So as Dan mentioned, I'm here to talk about HSC Digital, specifically what is it and how are we going to get there? So I'm going to answer 5 questions today. So what is HSC Digital? Where are we? How are we going to do it? How are these decisions being made? They're very big. How are we making sure they're the right ones? And how do I get more information? So we start off with what is HSC Digital? So we start with a broad idea of we have at the moment a lot of really good IT delivery and digital delivery happening across HSC. And the HSC Digital, in terms of a scope of organization, is to bring in the IT functionality, the digital functionality from across the trusts, from within BSO, from the various directorates that BSO would have IT people within, and from the arm's length body NIBTS, and bring them all together into one location, into one sort of virtual one directorate inside of BSO, the HSC Digital. That then would be delivering the IT and digital elements for across all of the HSC. The other arm's length bodies have already been through a process similar to this a number of years ago, where they, so our friends at RQIA, for example, and other arm's length bodies were then brought inside and have a service delivery through BSO ITS. In a similar way, this is creating a new directorate and then bringing together all the other organizations in IT and then delivering through a service level agreement back to those organizations. So really, it's a long-winded way of saying we're creating a body of expertise and excellence of HSC for HSC Digital, and all the IT staff will then deliver what we need to have delivered by HSC. So if we think of why, there's sort of 5 sort of key reasons why. So one is, and these are the icons are representing that. One's the workforce. We'll have a workforce that's better equipped to do what it needs to do and what the changing demands are of HSC, to address staff issues that we're having in terms of recruitment, retirement issues, allow better opportunities for the staff, better developmental opportunities, more specialist activities. We'll have then the ability for the increased cyber resilience as we move into a new era where there's ever greater cyber risk, the ability to have a single cyber task force, this ability for a group of people to be in charge of making sure that we're resilient is also very good and core reason for doing this. Then it's to do with the efficiency and use of resources that we would have around the system. alongside supporting the major projects and programs that are ongoing that require some slightly different needs from HSC's digital capability, which is then being addressed in this program. And ultimately, it better meets the needs of the patients and what we do in HSC, better supports our frontline staff as well if we do this correctly. But we all need to balance this up with the risks of doing that. We're doing large-scale transformational change across HSC, which carries with it inherent risk. So we need to be making sure that we're delivering this in a way that is that's safe and sustainable and can hit those benefits. And that is what we're trying to hold that balance of. Going forward, doing these changes, but doing it in a way that we can do in a safe manner for all involved. So, apologies. In terms of scale then, the scale of what the HSC Digital, when it's up and running, will be in and around 900 staff with a budget in around £130 million per annum. Okay, so it's a large scale organization or a large scale directorate that was being created here, and the ability of what we'll use those staff for is going to be very useful going forward in terms of their specialisms that we're able to deliver. And then in terms of the activity scope that's being delivered, this is a very complex diagram, but really it's saying anything with or without a plug that's involved in IT. So all those different areas you can see around there, the service desk, network services. The areas that we're currently under a lot of considerations around that line of business application support and the project management, because we're just looking at that quite carefully because that's delivered in different ways across a number of different trusts. So we just need to ascertain what is the best way of moving this forward in the HSC Digital. But in terms of the activity scope, that is the scope of being investigated. So we're looked at where we are organizationally and where we are on activity basis. So then in general, that's what we're looking to move forward. Where are we in this process? This all started with a number of different programs. There was a program called PSSP, which ran across the public sector in Northern Ireland, looking at ways of improving delivery. Part of that created a health sector work program plan. One of its strong recommendations was looking at the digital space and seeing how we combine and address some of the issues that we just talked around. As well as that, we also had the health-based infrastructure and application review, which noted a large number of duplication, of large amount of fragmentation of what was occurring across the IT landscape, alongside the shared service review back in 2016. So this idea has been bandied around in the system for a period of time. The permanent secretary then wrote to the chief executives in March 19 to be very clear about the need and the direction of travel and the benefits that we can have for doing this, and wrote with to endorse the health sector work program from PSSP. And that was the mandate to start the HSC Digital program. And that has very clear things that we need to do about moving 90% of the headcount and 90% of the budget inside of a shared service delivery model, which is where we're moving to then with HSC Digital. And if we break any large program, the 4 key steps of a mandate: assessing the options of the stakeholders, getting an approved business case and doing the actual change, and then go live. We are towards the end of that, assessing the options with stakeholders. We have a business case approved by the program board. It is in with the HSC for consideration. We need to make sure that we have the affordability mapped out for the next number of years, as we're currently with the HSC are working through. And then that will then commence in earnest later on in this year. The program was delayed through the pandemic, as a number of programs were, as we reallocated staff to deliver the pandemic response. And we've been through a number of iterations, a number of stakeholders, and I'll go on to how we get the buy-in and understanding what those stakeholders are in a moment. And that iterative process of making sure that we got a solution that works across Northern Ireland took a period of time, which is why we're at the point now. We've got that a model that we feel confident can deliver those risks that we talk about, holding that risk and balance through to delivering those benefits that we need to do. So how are we going to do it? A couple of people on the call will have seen a version of this presentation before, where we talk through the process and with key dates that are up on that process. So I want to start though with a bit of a warning, because this is slightly different. we're aware, we've had the updates before around the difficult financial situation that we're facing, and we've only just this week in the last couple of days got confirmation for the funding for this year, which has meant that we've had to do a slight change of how we're operating on the program and the dates moving forward. Those dates need to be discussed at the program board and make sure I've got the views of all the stakeholders. That program board is occurring 7 days from today, next Friday. And then we'll be able to release those dates at the open HSC Digital meeting. So for those that don't attend some of my presentations regularly, every time there's a program board occurs every 4 to 6 weeks. Jennifer Welsh, acting as the SRO, the Chief Executive of Northern Trust, and I then would hold an open briefing to all staff somewhere in the next week after that program board to make sure everyone is aware of what's being discussed and approved at that meeting. The next open HSC Digital meeting is the 18th of May at noon. There's an invite that has gone out. I'll give you the details of the links to how you get that invite at the end of this call, and we'll talk in detail about what the new timescales will be. So for today, I'll talk through the process of what we're doing and the timescales. The process would remain the same, and it is the preferred option of the program board of how we proceed. And then those the key dates will follow in due course. So we have this timescale where we have the OBC was agreed and submitted in January, and we're expecting approval in the very near future. These calendar they're being held is every 6 months before we are. So the process that we will have is that there will be a transfer of people in the HSCD will occur. That then gives us a 12-month transaction period where we have SLAs being tested through before the final transfer of contracts and then the final SLA in place. Now, for those that have been involved in the presentation before, those dates previously were communicated out as April 23 for the transfer of people in the HSC Digital, and then April 24 as the end of that transitory period. So that need for a 12-month period is still noted in the business case. That April 23 date is likely then to move backwards, and that's where the key dates will then come across in a few weeks' time. But just so people are aware, that's the sort of timescales we were previously talking about, but that has now moved back. So we'll have this 12-month period of the transitory period where we have the people transferring the HSC Digital, and then we check, does all those SLAs, so the service level agreements, does the agreements that we have with the organizations, but how we're going to run their IT, does that work okay? Learning all the lessons we've learned from BSTP and other programs we've done in the past. That immediately means that we have this period before the transfer of staff responsibilities for the delivering of digital rests with the IT, rests with the trust or the arm's length body. Then we have this period after the transfer and the HSC Digital is up and running, the responsibility rests with BSO. And we've got this period in the middle where we have a joint responsibility between the trust and BSO will be managed through memorandum of understanding and an oversight board, which will allow us to make sure that transitory period is working safely and working and moving everything that we need to do going forward in HSC Digital. To make sure that we're getting this right as well, there's 2 independent reviews that will take place in the months just before this transfer. They will make sure that we've got all the process that we have to have in place, and they will then check that what is we have ready will take us through the period all the way through that transitory period, and that we're all ready to go live and have HSC Digital operating as normal. To design and work through those periods, all the decisions that we requires a team of people in place, which then will take place about 12 to 18 months for that transfer. And then we have a number of work streams that I'll talk through in a moment, making all those key decisions. So that's things like, what does the service design look like? How does this operate? How does the finance model operate? Where do the assets rest with? Where's the contracts go? When we have staff that have partial time doing IT and partial time doing something else, how does that work? All those difficult questions and all those questions we have to go all the way down into detail will be decided through these work streams with the stakeholders, the key stakeholders, having the voice around that table. I'll talk through what those work streams are in one moment, but those work streams are run through to the completion of the transfer. During this transitory period, the service will largely be delivered as is. So we'll agree those SLAs. We will go through this period of checking those SLAs coming to be met. And then after HSC Digital is up and operating, that is when any improvement projects will occur, and any further improvements and driving of changes how we deliver will start to move. If we put it all then on one diagram, it looks like that, which is a slightly overwhelming diagram, but if we start off with that, which is why I build it up. When I've given this presentations before, so one of the questions that I get asked is frequently, does this mean that during this entire period that everything is frozen? No, changes will still be occurring and we'll still be driving improvements. The easiest place we can see that is the great works happening inside of the cybersecurity program, where they'll be seeking to do big improvements to how our cyber security and cyber resilience is in HSC. And as those activities and staff come on board, they will be slotted then into that new model of delivery and into HSC Digital, and it'll be delivered through that way. And that's true for any other of the programs that are up and running at the moment. So, look at the fourth question then. Fourth question is, how are those big decisions being made? There's a lot of big key decisions being made, and it affects a lot of people on this call. So if I can put this diagram up, this is our governance diagram, which I'll just spend a moment talking through. At the very top, we have in grey, we have the sort of the upward governance. We have that is Dan in his role of CDIO and the portfolio governance, and then further on to the top management group, which the permanent secretary would chair, where the mandate came through. So that following down from the permanent secretary then follows down to then a standards or program governance, where we have an SRO, as mentioned, Jennifer Wells, the chief executive of Northern Trust, is responsible for the delivery of this program. And then a delivery team sitting below with myself sitting in that program director role. The program board has got really great membership and really great representation through. That includes a number of chief executives, directors of finance, directors of performance and planning. I'll put the membership up 1 second, and trade unions as well. So trade union have representation at program board level to make sure there's oversight of everything on all decisions that are ongoing. There are then a number of work streams that I referred to earlier, working at the bottom. So that includes a service design work stream, a finance work stream, people work stream, contracts and procurements work stream, and then these orange and purple ones, which are getting the organizations ready. The orange box is getting the partner organizations or the customer organizations ready, i.e. the trusts and NIBTS. And the purple is getting BSO, the organization ready. So we're looking through, for example, the data governance requirements and making sure that even things like the estate is ready for kind of where people will be based and the equipment that they require, right down to things like passes, etc. So these purple and orange ones are getting the organizations ready and making sure we've got all the information that we require. These 4 blue ones then are where the key decisions being made. So the service design is looking through how does the service level agreements work, how does the HSC Digital work in the future, and that is being chaired then by the new digital director that's being appointed inside of BSO. Inside the finance work streams, working through all those finance issues around how to work, what budgets get transferred, what amounts, how do we deal with a lot of the complex financial mechanisms in the back. Around that, that's the finance director inside of BSO is chairing that. We have a people work stream where the director of HR inside of Southeast is chairing. That was working through all the people, the transfer issues, to pay of staff, and all the people culture elements, and making sure that we're getting that all correct. And then we have a contracts and procurement work stream as well, looking through the contracts, looking through where we join together, and what that looks like over the coming years for HSC Digital. We also have then a program assurance group sitting out in the corner. The program assurance group is chaired by Karen Jackson, Chief Executive of NIBTS. That is making sure that the design principles being agreed regionally are being used throughout this program, throughout the decision-making process and mechanism of HSC Digital. So what that means, and crucial to underpinning all this activity you'll see, is that there's a set of design principles that took a number of months to agree. Those set of design principles then underpin how we deliver HSC Digital. So you'll see there's some very key ones. For example, HSC will be a regional entity, will include on-site or near-site support the service. Okay, so what's not being proposed is one big building where everyone moves to and delivers all the work. That's not being proposed. What is being proposed is still the need for on-site, near-site, and all those activities that occur. So those principles then that have been agreed through that program board mechanism are then going to be checked with the program assurance group to check that it's still being used to guide that decision-making process. So in terms of program, I will leave these two slides, by the way. I apologize, but these slides shared around and be a copy of the video so you'll be able to pause it as well at any points. Just trying to see what those design principles were. If you want to look through it in more detail. There's also a copy of those available on the intranet page I'll share with you at the end of this talk. The program board membership as well, in a similar way, vein, is up. To kind of see there's a lot of representation right through, as I say, from trade union, medical, all the way through to various chief executives. Again, I'll leave that with you to look through, but it's a really great body of people that are really crucial for making these decisions as we move forward. So then, if that's what we're going through, how do I get more information and where are we going with this? So in terms of more information, as I mentioned, there's a commitment to having open HSC Digital meetings that are occurring. They occur every 4 to 6 weeks. The invites go out through the various channels that exist at the moment. There's also then the intranet page where we have those invites logged in addition. I know the organizations all have their own internal communications ongoing for staff that are being impacted. And also crucially, there's a key questions document that's been approved on the intranet. And if you're at all directly affected by this, I strongly recommend that you go and read that frequently asked questions document. There's an extract of it there for one of the pages. There's key questions of what does that mean? The job roles, do I have to move location? Where will I be working for? What about the trade union involvement? So a lot of those key questions that have come through a lot of those other communication avenues have all got then a dedicated answer that is really useful. And then if there's any questions coming further from that, then by all means, contact myself, contact the team. We currently have, at the moment where we are, is a pre-OBC. It's called pre-business case approval, and the team is a small but perfectly formed full-time team of myself and Tony Sands, with a bit of work from our external partner, Alistair Kilpatrick at Deloitte. So therefore, our communications will ramp up as that business case is approved. It allows us to appoint a dedicated communications role to understand the criticality of getting all these columns out, make sure everyone's aware of what is happening. We're also having that ramp up of activity that as a result of that business case approval, which means there'll be a lot more, as those groups form, there'll be a lot more understanding, clarity about where we are going forward around some of those real crucial issues. In terms of then the intranet page for those that are internal and can want more further information, this big long one is the SharePoint site, community.sharepoint.hscni.net. I have created a tiny URL for it, tinyurl.com/HSC Digital. So some of the organizations allow tiny URLs, in which case that's your tiny URL. And for those organizations that have the firewalls blocking tiny URL, that is the long form of that. So there on that is then the invite for the call on the 18th of May, where we'll kind of talk through the final dates once they're agreed and discussed with the program board. But in terms of what we've ran through today, well, the 5 questions of what is HSC Digital? We kind of talked a little bit about where we are, what it is, what's the scope of it, where we are in terms of the process. We talked at a high level about how we're going to do it, the broad timescales of it. Talked through the governance, and we talked a little bit about working to get more information. But I wanted to also just give everybody a chance on the call just to ask any questions. So in terms of a formal presentation, that is what I want to run through. And then Dan, I shall invite you if you want to compare any of the questions coming through at all. Perfect. I think Dan may be away from keyboard. I shall compare my own questions then.
Craig, there's only one in from Stephen Paul. Any potential impact of this programme given the ongoing political uncertainty? I think that's something that all the programmes are asking, so it's not maybe just directed solely at you.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to get Dan's take on this as well. And as you say, Linda, it's a real critical question for all the sort of big, large-scale programmes. There is, as has been sort of discussed on a number of different forums, there is the ongoing affordability issues that we're facing across HSC, and our desire to deliver a large amount of digital programs has to be within the realism of the affordability envelope that we have. There's one of the reasons why those move of the date of April 23 for that transfer of staff has moved is due to the fact that we need to have a lot of pre-activity, a lot of very detailed work going through around the service design piece. And that affordability then dictates when we can do that. So as we have that changes in affordability and as we have a look at that where our priorities lie, then obviously that has an impact on not just this program, but every program. And it's trying to strike a real balance then of what we're able to do with what we desire to do. So the fact that the funding has come through this year is a real sort of vote of confidence on the need for this program and why we need to do it. And I really should want to sort of emphasize, I probably didn't emphasize it enough during the presentation piece. The reason this is being done is not a cost-saving exercise. The reason this is being done is to create a better digital delivery body that can deliver for HSC. It's clear there's a number of issues where we're trying to do some of these major transformational pieces. But at the same time, there's also lots and lots and lots of strength in the current setup. So it's how do we get the balance of both? So because what we're doing isn't to try to save money, and indeed the business case calls out the need for reinvestment in IT and further investment in IT, that it means that we have this need to move forward, and that money coming through is a real statement this year that the support is there to move this forward. So while there is obviously we operate in an environment with the elections just taking place yesterday of political uncertainty, the direction of travel is certainly again a big vote in the right direction, and it's got the buy-in, it's got the mandate, and we're moving forward over the next number of months. Dan, I don't know if you want to comment any further. Just there was the queries around the impact to the programs given the political uncertainty at the moment.
Yes, apologies. I had to drop there and didn't catch all of the questions. The permanent secretary rang me, so unfortunately I had to drop and pick that up. None of you are any more or less important to the broader digital transformation agenda than the permanent secretary. However, the point that you're raising there, Craig, about the need to reprofile some of the investment in this program, the money that we use to deliver this particular work stream, the one that Craig is leading, is revenue money. So that is paying for staff to change job roles and design the new organizational structures and help people to transfer across between the organizations and the impact on them as individuals and in their work roles. Revenue's pretty short over the course of the next few years in health and care. I think most people are aware that the budget for this year is about 750 million adrift against our baseline position of 6.5 billion. Our financial stakeholders were looking through all of the asks that we have across the digital portfolio of the funding envelope for this year and over the next few years, and had challenged us a little bit to say, is HSC Digital something that absolutely needs to start now? And the answer that we'd come back with is absolutely bloody yes. We've gone through an engagement process with lots of people, many of whom are represented here on this call, to engage and discuss and consider and reflect on whether building a shared service function in the way that Craig's outlined for you here is the right thing to do for all of us as individuals and as individual organisations. And to press pause on that or to reconsider our approach to that would be a huge mistake, particularly given the findings of the PSSSP, the Public Sector Shared Services Programme that Craig outlined for you all earlier. So we want to maintain momentum, but there is this question of affordability. And we've agreed with our financial stakeholders that there will be funding made available, a significant amount of funding made available to proceed with the programme this year and to focus on all of the key bits of work that Craig set out here today. But it won't be the totality of what we'd originally asked for. It will be a slightly reduced amount. It won't be a de-emphasis or a sort of deprioritization of the programme. It's just a bit of a reprofiling to make sure that we can afford this alongside other commitments. So politically, we've got support. Financially now, we have support. We are glad to be able to commit that money, but it does require a little bit of a reprofiling, which Craig, I'm sure, has talked you through.
Thanks, Dan. There's a couple more questions have come through. Dan, I don't know if you want to compare those questions, or are you happy for me to ask and then answer them as they are arriving?
You don't need me as MC, Craig. You go ahead. I'm happy to help on any of the answers.
Perfect. So the question there from Fergus: does the programme consider 24/7 support for businesses' critical systems as part of its scope? So HSC Digital is creating the organisation that delivers the digital services that HSC wants. So it is combining as I said, there's all the great IT departments into one organisation that's then going to deliver digital, and that will then deliver what the customers, what the trusts want and need. By default, then the support that we have, one of the principles is for what is going to be put in place, it has to be at least as good as what is currently in place. So it means that there will be no backward steps in terms of provisions that people will be using in the trust. At the same time, should there be a need for an increase in scope? So for example, we talked an example through that presentation on the cybersecurity program, that then that cybersecurity program has the business case with the additional funding that was needed to lift all that up. So for example, 24/7 would be a good example. We're creating a HSC Digital that can do things. Should there be the desire for that HSC Digital to operate 24/7, then that would require an investment either through funding coming through either charges to trust, to customers, or through investments through the back end and business cases. But to enable that to occur. So in and of itself, is the objective of HSC Digital to deliver 24/7 services? No, it is not the objective of HSC Digital to ensure 24/7 services occurs. But can HSC Digital, as part of it existing, be requested to do 24/7? Yes, it can. And if that is what the customers want and money is be able to pay for, then that can be built in to the service provision of the organisation. Does that answer the question, Fergus?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. There's always going to be a balance to Dan's previous point. There's obviously the affordability place. It's good. I'll take your answer as there's a placeholder for a future discussion. That's not the bombard you with a question that's quite difficult to answer, but we need to be considering 24/7. It's on the map.
The question's been asked, Fergus, in the wake of WannaCry. One of my departmental colleagues, Deborah McNeely, who unfortunately is not in the department anymore, and her seat has been taken by a fellow called Chris Matthews. So Deborah, in the wake of WannaCry, said, "What would it take to go 24/7?" And when that question actually landed with BSO ITS colleagues, it was qualified to let's stratify all of our applications and find those that are business critical, kind of mission critical applications, and consider those to be tier 1. And the question then became, what would it take to go 24/7 on tier 1 applications? There was a creation of a view of that, what that number might look like, including shift patterns and additional resources and holiday cover and all of what you need to operate a 24/7 service. And it came up with a really significant number. I think it was 6 or 7x the 9 to 5 type arrangement. Which it's not uncommon in IT to come up with numbers of that magnitude. And there was a sense that we couldn't possibly put that back on the table with our departmental colleagues because the number was too big. And actually what I think we need to do now, and I discussed this with the BSO board recently, is not make any assumptions, right? If the question's been asked, we've got to answer the question. And it may be that the money needs to be found in order to be able to secure mission critical services on a 24/7 basis for business continuity. But that's not for the technologists to decide, as Craig says, it's for the customers, for the business to decide. So that's a piece of work that I discussed with Karen Bailey and the BSO board, that we might go and dig out that bit of thinking and play it back in. And inevitably that's then going to come into the context of HSC Digital as part of that conversation going forward, as Craig says, not as a problem for the programme as we've defined it today to solve, but as a potential problem for the future organisation that we create to wrestle with.
Perfect.
Thanks, Dan. And the obvious point you made in the comment there, we can't lose sight of the fact that we do have an element of 24/7 support right now. I suspect that will need to be scaled up in the future, but we can't lose sight of what we have now. Thanks, Dan.
No, absolutely, and it's very. I see Andrew's coming in with some of the 24/7 on-call support. Some of it exists already. It's the nature of what 24/7 means as well. On-call versus actually having people in the building ready to do things. So it's a complex answer, but yes, we'll move on. Sure, we'll explore that one probably enough, if that's okay for us. Claire has asked around how the program board, or how will the program select members to each of the work streams. Yes, so the program board has nominated chairs for each of those work streams, and we have to be very careful because we're in an environment where we are doing a lot of change in the HSC Digital, and all the big programs are doing a lot of change across the trust, and not even just digital programs. We've got encompassing a huge amount of change. We've got the NIPIMS program, the NIPACS program, all demanding time of our trust colleagues and our various colleagues across the HSC to enable work to occur. And then we've also got the non-digital programs, like your pathology modernization program, equally putting on demands on that. So we have to be mindful that probably what we would like is for a representation from each of the trusts for each of the work streams, for each of the specialisms, and we'll end up with hundreds of people making those decisions, but we have to balance that off against the availability of staff. The criteria that's being applied is pretty standard for a lot of the big change programs. So each work stream will have representation from each trust, and each specialist working group will have representation. So for example, there will be a request for a head of IT member to sit on working group X, and then they will represent the heads of IT in that working group. And then meanwhile, they need to ensure that each working group has representation from each of the trusts as well. Therefore, we try to play smart with how much time that we're taking of each staff member being delivered on that. The decisions as to what that looks like then will be taken alongside. So as part of the team that's being put in place to manage the HSC Digital transformation piece, there will be a team member for each of those working groups that's leading that piece as a full-time change agent, as a program manager change agent, who will work alongside the chair of that group. And the chair will be working to work out what does that membership look like, which then gets ratified by the program board, which has all that representation then on the back. So I suppose the short version, Claire, that is that the chair will decide, working alongside the HSC Digital colleague, and then the program board will ratify that membership or suggest changes where it's needed. There are some built-in must-haves. So they are colleagues in the trade unions were very keen to make sure that they are cited of all of this. So they have a program board seat, and they also have a seat on the people work stream, and various other seats and where they need them as well. But again, and the other caveat is representation from each affected the specialist groups, and then each trust / arm length body having representation of those work streams too. I can see a smile, Claire, so presumably that's okay.
Yeah, thanks.
No worries. Perfect. There's one question's come through to me directly as well, which is just talking around the long term. I'll just rephrase this question if that's all right, Donna. So Donna McDonald's dropped me a wee query directly. Just around how does this look like long term going forward? Around, are we combining any platforms and making decisions around combining platforms in the near future? So, for example, EMS and Symphony are the ED systems will be replaced by Encompass, but there's others that are in the same position. How are we going to make that decision process within HSC Digital? So I'll go back to what I said at the top of the call in some ways. The HSC Digital, the remit of this program is to create the vehicle that is HSC Digital, is to create a vehicle of a group of specialists across HSC who can do all the stuff that we need HSC Digital to do. So, have the developers, have the really great DBAs, have everybody in a place where we can all work together. DHCNI is not being done away with at all. HSC Digital is a delivery body that delivers stuff, that delivers the digital initiatives that HSC want to have. That overarching strategy piece still exists. So there's a lot of that. A lot of that sort of tying together, co-working decision-making process, then it's what will come out through those decisions. So how do we decide, how do we prioritize current programs is a really good example. I know there's currently a prioritization meeting happening at the moment. That model, I suspect, is what we will need to keep doing going forward, as in we'll always have more demands of our change than we're able to do at any one time, given the financial constraints and the people constraints. So how do we prioritize that? That method of prioritization of working with DHCNI and working with the customers, working with our capacity, that sort of agreement between those areas, and then prioritizing that and going through all the governance still remains. HSC Digital is a delivery body that's being expanded, and then it works alongside a lot of the governance pieces that currently exist. And then how that works alongside it is designed within that service design phase. Perfect. Is there any further queries or questions from anybody? Because that's as many as I've got on my inbox. Excellent. Could I just point out, because I know there will be other questions, but also just to point out again, if you haven't read that FAQ document, to read the FAQ documents, because there's a lot of questions that have been answered, and a bit of thought has gone into those answers, and it's been through the trade unions and various other people as well. So I know there'll be questions around where will I be located and everything else, but I will go back to the principle and drawing attention to the principle. The idea here is we're not going to buy a building somewhere and we're all going to move into that building. That is not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create a fit for purpose organization, which is uniquely cut for HSC. And that is not, it was very clear through that stakeholder engagement that buying a building and sticking everyone in that building is not going to work for HSC. We're trying to work out what will work for HSC instead. But a lot of that's answered in the FAQ document. Dan, I'll hand back to yourself. I've seen you.
Yeah, brilliant. Just to say a huge thank you. The question that you got from Donna there was an interesting one, which you handled well. But I think it shows that there's quite a lot of complexity in the relationship between different organisations. So what does this programme do, and the resulting organisation that will also be called HSC Digital, in comparison to what DHCNI, EPMO, and EA does? Lots of acronyms in there. It might actually be worthwhile, and perhaps this is one for Jen or Linda to pick up, that at some point on digital dispatches, we might actually try and sketch out what the future organizational architecture, if you wanted to put it that way, might look like, because people might be interested in that, just to see how things are likely to pan out. We don't know all the answers, but we can certainly tell people what we know so far. So I just want to say on behalf of the collected gang here today, thank you, Craig, for your time and for your presentation. If anybody has any suggestions of other topics that you'd like to hear us talk about on these sessions, then do feel free to drop a note through to the email address that's on the bottom of the flyer that you'd have received for today's session. With that, I will bid you all a great Friday afternoon and have a brilliant weekend. Thanks, everyone.